What happens if this changes everything we thought we knew about the last year of storyline? What if this moment becomes the beginning of something much bigger? A revelation that shatters the very foundation of Port Charles and rewrites the history of a beloved character. Guys, I don't think we're paying attention to what comes next. We are all so distracted by the current corporate feuds, the backstabbing at deception, and the poolside drama that we are completely missing the massive ticking time bomb sitting quietly in a maximum security prison. We have been watching a legacy character act entirely out of character, justifying his dark descent with medical jargon and trauma, but the truth might be 100 times more sinister. The story we are about to explore isn't just a clever twist. It is a fundamental rewriting of reality that will put multiple lives on the line and change the trajectory of the show forever. Let us take a step back and look at the board exactly as it stands right now. Curtis Ashford is staring down the barrel of a short stint in Pentonville, a dire consequence of a plea deal he is taking to resolve the assault charges involving Isaiah Gannon. He is preparing to leave behind Portia and his newborn son, stepping into a gritty, dangerous world to pay his debt to society. Meanwhile, back in Port Charles, the man we all know as Drew Kane is currently recovering his mobility after a near-drowning incident orchestrated by Nina Reed. This version of Drew has been ruthless, cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the warmth and honor that the former Navy SEAL once possessed. The narrative has repeatedly told us that the severe beating Drew took in Pentonville, the one that nearly killed him and left him with a traumatic brain injury, altered his personality. But that is just the setup. The pieces are moving into place because Curtis is about to walk into the exact same prison where Drew's life supposedly changed forever. So, let us dive into the first future. Imagine Curtis Ashford, a man with razor-sharp private investigator instincts, trying to keep his head down and serve his time quietly. But Curtis is incredibly observant. He notices the shadows, the whispers of the guards, the inmates kept in perpetual isolation off the official book. What if Curtis catches a glimpse of a heavily guarded prisoner in the infirmary or the solitary confinement wing? A man who looks, moves, and sounds exactly like the old Drew Kane. If that happens, we are looking at the ultimate impostor scenario. The Drew who returned to Port Charles was never Drew at all. He was a surgically altered plant, an imposter designed to infiltrate ELQ and the Quartermain family. Who benefits in this scenario? The shadowy organization pulling the strings, extracting wealth and corporate secrets from Port Charles. But who is in grave danger? Curtis Ashford. The moment Curtis realizes the truth, he becomes the biggest threat to a multi-million-dollar conspiracy. The corrupt guards, the warden, the syndicate, they will not let Curtis make a single phone call to the outside world. The story could be heading toward a terrifying parallel. Remember what happened to Drew? He was beaten so brutally by his fellow inmates that he was left clinging to life. If Curtis starts asking questions, the exact same fate awaits him. The people protecting the real Drew's captivity will orchestrate a riot or a targeted hit on Curtis to silence him permanently. We could see Curtis desperately trying to survive, fighting off corrupt inmates in the dark corridors of Pentonville, knowing that if he dies, the real Drew Kane dies with him. This could lead to a heartbreaking situation where Portia and Marshall receive news that Curtis has been brutally attacked, completely unaware that he was targeted because he uncovered the biggest secret in town. The stakes here are astronomical because it places Curtis in the ultimate hero role, risking his own life to save a man everyone else has already given up. But we have to look at all the angles, so let us explore a second future, one that completely flips the genre of the show. What if the man in Pentonville isn't just a captive, but the original blueprint for a much larger, more terrifying operation? Imagine a scenario where the syndicate running Pentonville is utilizing memory mapping technology, the same kind of advanced, dangerous tech we have seen with Caesar Faison and Peter August in the past. There is a chance that the Drew in Port Charles isn't just an actor in a mask. He is a fully brainwashed sleeper agent who genuinely believes he is Drew Kane. The real Drew is being kept alive in Pentonville, strictly as a biological anchor, a source to continuously extract memories or genetic material to keep the imposter functioning. If the story goes down this path, it changes the entire landscape of General Hospital. It elevates the plot from a simple kidnapping to a high-tech psychological thriller. When Curtis discovers the real Drew, he isn't just exposing a lie, He is triggering a catastrophic existential crisis for the fake Drew in Port Charles. Imagine the fake Drew's programming starting to break down as the real Drew regains his strength or as the connection is severed. The imposter might experience terrifying flashes of his true identity, leading to erratic, violent behavior that endangers Willow, Nina, and the Quartermain. Jason Morgan would have to step in, not knowing if he is fighting his brother or a weaponized clone. This path would require a massive team up between the PCPD, the WSB, and Jason's underground network just to breach Pentonville and extract the true Drew before the Syndicate executes him to cover their tracks. Now, let us venture into the third future. This is the possibility that almost no one is thinking about right now. The wildest wild card on the table. What if the real Drew Kane in Pentonville is not a helpless victim waiting for a heroic rescue? What if he stayed inside that maximum security hellhole entirely by choice? There is a chance that during his initial incarceration, the real Drew uncovered a massive global conspiracy operating out of Pentonville, perhaps tied to Jen Sidwell, the WSB, or a resurrected DVX fact. Drew, being a highly trained Navy SEAL, realized that if he simply walked out of prison, his powerful enemies would slaughter his family, including Scout and Dan. So he made a devil's bargain. He allowed an operative to take his place in Port Charles to act as a decoy, keeping the crosshairs off his loved one. In this incredible scenario, the real Drew has been running a deep cover shadow war from inside the prison. He is the one pulling strings, gathering intelligence, and dismantling the Syndicate from the inside out. When Curtis Ashford inevitably stumbles upon him, Drew doesn't beg for help. Instead, Drew corners Curtis, pins him against a cell wall, and demands absolute silence. This would turn the narrative completely upside down. Drew is not a captive. He is a general commanding a war from a concrete bunker. If Curtis gets involved, he doesn't become a savior, he becomes a soldier in Drew's secret army. Curtis's short prison sentence suddenly transforms into a high-stakes espionage mission, where he has to act as Drew's proxy, smuggling information out to Jason Morgan without tipping off the corrupt guards. It is a brilliant, action-packed twist that restores Drew's legacy as a brilliant tactical operator rather than a passive victim. If you ask me, we have to look at the narrative breadcrumbs the writers have been dropping for months. The path that feels most likely is the gritty, grounded reality of the first scenario. I keep coming back to the idea that the current Drew in Port Charles has been deliberately written to be as unlikable, ruthless, and detached as humanly possible. The writers have systematically destroyed Drew's relationships with Jason, with Willow, and with his own moral compass. Why? Because they want the audience to absolutely despise this version of the character. They are building up our resentment so that the reveal of the true Drew languishing in Pentonville hits with maximum emotional impact. The path that makes the most sense is Curtis stumbling upon the truth through sheer investigative grit and undeniable intuition. Curtis has the mind of a private investigator. He cannot simply turn off his instincts just because he is wearing an orange jumpsuit. He will notice a guard slipping extra rations to a hidden cell, or he will hear a prisoner using specific military jargon that only a SEAL would know. I firmly believe Curtis will investigate, push the boundaries too far, and trigger the corrupt prison guards to silence. We are going to see Curtis fighting for his life in the shower block or the exercise yard, desperately trying to survive long enough to get a message to Portia or Jason. The tragedy of Curtis suffering the exact same brutal beating that supposedly changed Drew is too poetic for the writers to ignore. It brings the story full circle and gives Curtis a massive, heroic arc that redeems any past mistakes and solidifies his place as a true protector of Port Charles. But let us look ahead, because the discovery is only the beginning. If that happens, if Curtis survives the assassination attempt and the truth about the fake Drew leaks out, what happens next may be the most explosive fallout Port Charles has seen in a decade. Think about the massive, long-term consequences of this revelation. The bigger consequence may be the absolute destruction of every legal and personal tie the fake Drew has established. Every contract signed at ELQ, every political campaign move, every share of stock transferred, all of it becomes legally void. Tracy Quartermain and Michael Corinthos will have an absolute field day tearing apart the fake Drew's empire, but the emotional toll will be devastating to those who were fooled. When the real Drew finally steps foot back in Port Charles, Battered, traumatized, but alive, he will find his life completely decimated. He will have to look into the eyes of Willow Kane, who has been manipulated, blackmailed, and terrified by an impostor wearing his face. How does Willow reconcile the monster she has been dealing with against the good man standing before her? The story could be heading toward a massive psychological journey for everyone involved. Jason Morgan, who has felt alienated and betrayed by his brother's recent actions, will realize he abandoned his true brother to rot in a cell. The immense guilt Jason will carry could drive a completely new dynamic between the twins, forging a bond stronger than ever as they hunt down the people responsible for the swap. And we cannot forget about the impostor. The moment the fake Drew realizes his cover is blown and the real Drew is free, he will not just quietly surrender to the PCPD. This could lead to a massive, deadly standoff in the middle of Port Charles. The impostor, cornered and desperate, might take hostages, perhaps Nina Reeves or even young Scout. The ensuing hostage crisis would require Jason, Anna Devane, and a newly freed Curtis Ashford to execute a high-risk tactical rescue. Looking ahead, the shockwaves of this single discovery in Pentonville will tear through the Quartermains, the Ashfords, and the Corinthos family, leaving nothing untouched. Furthermore, we must consider the profound impact this will have on Curtis Ashford's own legacy. Curtis went into Pentonville facing a dark chapter, worried about missing the first 8 months of his newborn son's life and straining his marriage with Portia. But by exposing this massive conspiracy and saving Drew Kane, Curtis will emerge not as a convicted felon, but as a definitive hero. The governor would almost certainly have to grant Curtis a full pardon for uncovering such deep-rooted corruption within the state's own maximum security facility. Imagine the emotional reunion when Curtis returns home to Portia, Marshall, and Stella, battered, bruised, but completely vindicated. His sacrifice will bridge the gap between the Ashford family and the Quartermains forever, creating an unbreakable bond of gratitude. Jason Morgan and the real Drew Kane will owe Curtis a life debt, fundamentally shifting the power dynamics and alliances in Port Charles. The future of the city is not about who holds the most shares in a company. It is about who is truly wearing the face of the people we love. And guys, when this truth finally explodes, nothing will ever be the same again.
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.